With that, welcome you inside this midweek edition of Big Ten Today. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. As promised, we'll hear from Ryan Day shortly, but we begin with the big story and the focus, one of Ohio State's main conference contenders. There's a different feel in State College this preseason. Penn State opens the year considered by many to be the favorite to win the Big Ten and national titles. The offensive backfield is loaded. The defense has stars at all three levels, plus a coordinator who just won it all. And the schedule is on the Nittany Lions side. Our training camp crew, anchored by Dave Revsine, has more on the blue and white.
Rick, thanks. Here with Jake Butt and Yogi Roth. We saw a pretty good football team on Tuesday night inside Beaver Stadium. Got a chance to watch Penn State go through a practice under the lights. This was the team that the media picked by a very narrow margin to win the Big Ten over the defending national champs, Ohio State. Your impressions of what we saw, Yogi?
Well, number one, how much fun is it to be in that stadium at night? Like, I know there wasn't a whiteout crowd, but it felt like whiteout energy, right? It's the first time the players have been in this stadium since their spring game, which we know wasn't necessarily a game. So to watch competitive periods tonight, it's just fun. And we're in football. And then I think to all of our points, they looked the part. They looked the part of a national championship contender. Starting from jump, walkthrough, serious tone. We talked about that off camera. You look at the coaching staff and listen to the vernacular, way they're coaching every drill. And then I go to the stars, or the game wreckers on defense, right? Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton. Look at the maturity of Drew Aller, just his composure, the way that he commands every little thing, whether it's the huddle, an audible, talking to a receiver after a drop, like all of those little things to me stood out. And they just look steady. They look like a championship team looks, whether it was SC back in the day, Ohio State last year, Michigan 2 years ago. They just looked the part tonight.
Yeah, I mean, just physically right away, I mean, that's a championship team. Like, there's NFL players all over the field. I look at the offensive line, 6'5", 6'6", 310, 320, and lean and athletic and can move. The depth is the other piece. I think they're 7 or 8 deep at the offensive line. There's a reason Drew Aller came back, and I'm excited to see what he can do now with this new group of weapons from the wide receivers outside. I think there's a few key things that are going to decide this season. We've established that they're going to compete for a conference title and a national title. Who do they go to in these key moments? I like what I saw of the wide receivers, but to me, in the key moments, they are going to lean on those big boys up front. They're going to lean on the running game. And on the defensive line, you know, when they're playing Ohio State, the antidote to stopping that passing game and those talented wide receivers, you need to generate a pass rush. I think Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton have a chance to be the best D-tackle, defensive end combo in the Big Ten.
There's a ton of athleticism on that defense. I want to take a little bit more of a dive into what you were talking about with the offensive line. You've got 2,000-yard running backs back in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. But I think the big question that people are wondering is, how do you replace Tyler Warren? How much of that is done with the wide receivers, and how much of that is done at the tight end spot? So you touched a little bit on some of these players they brought in. Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Kyron Hudson from USC, Ross coming in from Troy. What do we think of that whole group and how they'll alleviate the loss of Warren?
Well, one of the greatest tight ends in Big Ten history, right? You talk about recent college football, over 100 grabs. He did everything, right? He's a center, he's a quarterback, he's a running back. He's not here anymore. They're not going to have to do those types of things with their tight ends because they don't have that type of player. But I think overall, the group elevated. The group elevated. He is a star, right? Best tight end in America, as we know. Big-time draft pick. But I look at the tight end group, at least 3 tight ends they're going to use throughout this season. The receiver group, you just referenced the 3 transfers. I thought 3 freshmen looked pretty good, let alone some of the guys that have been in the system for a year or two. So I think the overall depth, you know they're going to shift in motion like crazy. You know they're going to run the football to create the play-action game. I go to my biggest question is when it's 3rd and 7, got to have it down, and it's man-to-man coverage against Oregon, and this place is going crazy in a whiteout. Man-to-man coverage against Ohio State, we know what that environment will be like. Can you win? Can you separate? That's where they struggle. That's the truth about this team a year ago. Drew Aller, he'll make the throw. I'm a believer in his next step in his evolution, and I think today, watching these wideouts, they're much better. So they can run it, be complimentary, they'll have a shot, and then it's going to be 3 throws in those big games in the second half. Can guys separate? I think so. That's TBD. We got to see that thing as it plays out.
Yeah, and I mean, just to look back and tell the story of last season when they fell short against Ohio State, you turn on the film, there was no separation for the wide receivers. The loss to Notre Dame, no completions to the wide receivers. Why? Because there was no separation to the wide receivers. Just from what I saw today, Kyron Hudson is the alpha dog of that group. He's physically imposing, about 215 pounds. He's fast enough to stretch vertical with very strong attacking hands. And I think he's going to be a really hard guy to bring down after the catch. So he'll be involved in the spring game. You mix in all these other guys. I even think Liam Clifford, he's going to be a different player this year because he doesn't have to assume the role of wide receiver one. He gets to be the guy that they can move around and work in the slot. And now you can factor in all the different personnel options that Kotelnicki has. We saw them mix in both the backs in the backfield with 2 or 3 tight ends. You can get in a goal line personnel and run spread empty and attack defenses vertical. It's going to be extremely hard to stop.
It is fun just to watch the walkthrough and see all of the different combinations that he draws up. I mean, it is really neat. I'm sure for you guys who are steeped in the X's and O's, you geek out just a little bit. I'd add Tyser Denmark, too, to that wide receiver group. I thought he had some nice grabs today. I think the big question that Penn State fans are, well, there are a few of them. Obviously, wide receiver is part of them. I think the other thing you're wondering about is just the psychological component of it. The fact that all these guys came back for one last run at it. The fact that they haven't won those big games. Again, they have one win against a top 5 team this century. We're in 2025. So for whatever reason, as good as they have been, they haven't been able to elevate to get to great. What will it take to get to great? And do they have what they need to do that?
They have the talent, for sure. I think they have the big game experience. I think we all would agree when veterans return, there's a sense of urgency that's just different. Saw that today play out. But to me, it comes down to James Franklin and navigating the psyche in between the ears of your players. If you stumble at home against Oregon, that will be the story until you lace them up and play again. How do you navigate in advance of that? How do you just treat that as another game? When you play Ohio State, we know the record against Ohio State, especially when they're one of the top-ranked teams in the country. They came out preseason, I think, number 2 in the AP, right? So you look at that overall and you say, okay, how are you preparing your team to treat every day like it is a Big Ten championship, CFP caliber day? That is the task of the head coach. And from talking to assistants, players, I feel as though that everybody knows that the goal is to win it all and to be at the national championship, but they know that they have to take the next natural step. And I think that's a maturity. So I actually feel pretty good about that, but that will be the task of James Franklin, the head coach.
You know, to me, when I think about the psychological aspect, and I think back to, having butterflies as a player and you get nervous, that's not going to go away. They're going to have to face that at some point this season. The antidote is, when you have a big physical offensive line, you can lean on those guys. Not just in the key moments, but all of a sudden you can dictate the terms of the game. You can lean on that run game. All of a sudden you can get into play action. That's going to help settle your quarterback's nerves. That's going to give your wide receivers time to separate. On the defensive line, they can dictate the terms of the game because all of a sudden you can suffocate that opposing quarterback, like Julian saying in Columbus. Does he even feel he has time to release the ball out to his weapons? I think the trenches are going to be the key to them coming into these games with settled nerves and confidence.
One of the things I love is they haven't shied away from it. They haven't ducked it. I mean, you asked the question of the players and of James Franklin as well, and he always talks about the next opponent and, right, Nevada. But he was very forthcoming, I thought, both at media days and when we were here today, about talking about how you deal with expectations, because you know that it's out there. I did want to ask you guys a little bit about Jim Knowles and the adjustment there. That's a huge storyline. Obviously, you get the defensive coordinator from the national championship team a year ago. You have this great tradition of defense here. I mean, they have built this program around, you lose Brent Pry, Manny Diaz comes in and does a great job. You lose Manny Diaz, Tom Allen comes in and does a great job. And so now you find yourself with the national championship defensive coordinator, a professor of sorts in Jim Knowles, but someone who runs a complicated scheme. And so tell me how you think they adjusted to that scheme.
Well, I'd even say, just from an expectation standpoint, bringing in Jim Knowles, paying him what you're paying him, and him choosing to come here, that only adds to the expectations. He came here because he believes they can compete for a national title. It is a complex system, but what a great test to face this Kotelnicki offense, because they're going to test you with personnel shifts, motions. And I felt the defense was mentally engaged. They were playing fast today. They were communicating. They never looked out of place. And I think an underrated piece that's going to help the team as a whole, not just the defense, is the self-scout that we heard. Jim Knowles was able to sit down with Kotelnicki, Franklin, Drew Aller, and this entire offense to say, hey, here's what I saw when we played you. Here's what stresses me as a defensive coordinator. So it's not just the defense. I think Knowles' experience can elevate the entire team.
And I think it's been great for Drew Aller, too. We haven't talked a lot about him. He's got scars. We all know that, and I think you need him at quarterback. I think going up against this scheme and making discerning decisions, I saw the best version of Drew Aller in one practice. I think we're going to see by far the best version of him this season.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of along those same lines. We were talking to Jim Knowles about, hey, going up against Andy Kotelnicki, going up against Chip Kelly last year, that makes your defense better. Kind of the inverse is true here, too. Drew Aller going up against Jim Knowles' defense can only make him better. Tons to talk about here from Penn State. Really a great day, Rick. An impressive team, to say the least. We'll send it back to you in Chicago.